At the end of the first session of the 11th Parliament, the leader of opposition, Matthias Mpuga, announced what he called the milestones of the opposition during the first session of the 11th Parliament. They included, among others, his response to the State of the Nation address, the response to the Prime Minister's statement on COVID, and the statement on the alternative development approach to the parish development model. There are many others because they had 11 statements from the leader of opposition in the first session of the 11th Parliament, 3 statements by shadow ministers, 2 motions, 12 minority reports, and 21 alternative ministerial policy statements. Recently, at the beginning of the second session, he tabled another legislative agenda, which included what they want to do. And during the first meeting, they have so far done also 4 statements from the leader of opposition. But with all this that they seem to be doing, there's a sentiment generally in the public that the opposition in Parliament is not doing enough to ensure that the legislation, all the roles of Parliament are being done in the correct way or for the benefit of Ugandans. And that's what we want to discuss here on Focus on Parliament. Good morning, viewers. You're welcome to this show. I am Agather, Atuhaire, your host, and I am hosting 2 important people for this discussion. One being the very first leader of opposition in our Parliament, Professor Maurice Ogenga Latigo. You're welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you very much, Agatha, and hello, viewers.
Yes, the next one is currently the Shadow Minister for Defense and Internal Affairs, right? Yes, and a UPC member from Erute South, Honourable Jonathan Odur. You're welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Yes, so I want us to go right into this discussion that all the things we can list that the opposition in Parliament is doing or seems to be doing. I think I have also seen an article written of some scorecard saying they are the most effective opposition considering all these we listed. But then you still have those views about the claims that they are not doing enough, that they are in bed with the NRM, which is passing laws that are very unpopular. I would like to start with you, Professor Latigo. What is your view about that? And you can also start by telling us what it means to lead the opposition in Parliament.
Well, Agatha, let me start by saying that I was not the first leader of opposition. The very first leader of opposition in Uganda was Basil Bataringaya at independence. But I was the first leader of opposition under the 1995 Constitution.
Yes.
I would have loved to see Jonathan talk about themselves in Parliament before I could comment, but you've already asked me, and I can't run away from that responsibility. The opposition in Parliament is just an element of the very Parliament that we have. Just like when I was leader of opposition in the 8th Parliament, I was, me and my group were the personification of what the Ugandan Parliament, the 8th Parliament, was. With, on the side of the NRM, the government side, Prime Minister Apollo Nsimbambi, and very many senior Ugandans. And so we had the huge advantage that in that Parliament, personal egos and petty interests were not important. All that was important was our ability to convey our issues, to talk to our colleagues in Parliament, and talk to Ugandans in our work as parliamentarians. And that allowed us to leave a memory that many people think, well, I have got sentiments saying, well, you were a very good leader of opposition. No, the opposition that time, we had people like Ben Wacha, John Kawanga, Cecilia Ogual. Those were people who were easy to lead
Yeah.
because they were leaders in their own rights. Now things have changed. And because things have changed, the parliament that Jonathan and his colleagues are in is a very different parliament from the one we were in.
In what sense?
I can give you a simple example. The last parliament that I was in, people hardly saw me on the floor of the house. Because you go into the house and you start talking, and then you listen to colleagues making contribution, and you ask yourself, why am I here? So most times I would then pick my things and just walk away. Luckily for me, I was a member of the Pan-African Parliament, where the kind of things that I perceive to be the role of a parliamentarian finds space. So, and we were too engaged. I mean, one time an MP, when the sugar bill was being debated, that day I was in the house, and that MP was looking for his colleague Odur, and we had just talked with the Honourable Odur, and I said, "Oh, he went that way." Then when he had it, he said, "Oh, Professor, we don't see you in this parliament, but we understand. You're the ones who inspired some of us to join politics. But we don't belong to this parliament. For us, we are here for the money." That was last parliament. I didn't know what to say. So I've watched this, the current parliament, a bit. We've had meetings in the parliamentary pension scheme. And I had members come to me and say, "Professor, you need to help us. Talk to the leaders of parliament. Maybe talk to the president, because things are not okay." That sentiment is there. And so for those who are making a judgment of what Honourable Segona and the opposition have done,
Yes.
they must reflect it against what this parliament is really all about. It is not a legislative body that plays the constitutional role of oversight. It's like a collaborative body with the executive. It's like the ruling party. If it is a matter of policies, yes, the executive will say this is policy. But if it is an issue of accountability or this and that, you should act independently as parliament. And so I'm from my own perspective, the opposition have done fairly well in spite of the circumstance. But the weakness that people think about now were also in my time. And at one time, I even wrote to President Museveni about it. And I said, "Mr. President, what we need to do is to remove the 10 soldiers from parliament and give those 10 slots to the parties that go to parliament. If we did that, it would mean that the leaders of parties who contest for the presidency and are not successful, they can then come in and lead their parties in parliament. And maybe that would make a big difference, because in the UK, you cannot be a leader of a party unless you are elected from within parliament. But ours, you'll find leaders of parties outside. Yeah. And their parties are inside with another leader. Yeah. And then you find conflict. And I can tell you, I had lots of difficulties with my own party. The very first time we were on the Parliamentary Commission, they wanted us. We went and gave 35 million for vehicle transport. And we went on TV with Emmanuel Dombo, who was a commissioner, and we talked about it. I went to my party FDC headquarters, and I was bashed that we were wasting money. And I just opened the party platform and I said, here you have said you're facilitating members of parliament. Suggest to me a better way of facilitating them than giving them transport, and it's just 35 million. But it was not that what we decided was wrong. It was that I decided. And it became a problem. There are two big incidences. The deployment in Somalia.
Yeah.
FDC were absolutely opposed. And Kionga was Minister of Defense. He came to me and said, look, why are you people opposed to this? I said, Crispus, how can I help when you guys don't even give me the information that I should use to justify our position? And then that day, Kionga brought documents, he got agreement. The country had already been mandated and signed agreement to lead a peace mission in Somalia. That day I left Parliament at 2 a.m. I read all the documents, did the summaries, and prepared. The next morning I called opposition caucus meeting and circulated the documents. And when I held the meeting, I explained. And the opposition in Parliament immediately said, no, we cannot oppose the deployment. What you do is just go and prepare a statement. And we called the press. And we supported the deployment. The visit of the Queen was a big crisis. My party didn't want that they should boycott Parliament. I said, what is wrong with you? The Queen is a mother. It's not a politician. If Gordon Brown was coming, yes, we could do something like that. The Commonwealth Secretariat had to send Malcolm Fraser, the Commonwealth Secretary General, to Uganda. And I assured him that, no, we will not boycott because it is our responsibility to demonstrate dignity. That is a characteristic of our country. We have no reason to boycott. And we welcome the Queen in Parliament. So these things happen. The party leadership is outside, opposition leadership is in Parliament.
Then there's even the other leadership.
Yes, the two will struggle. And when you have a combination of opposition parties constituting the opposition, each party also has its own internal
position. Yeah.
And so to judge the opposition the way people judge them is probably a bit unfair. They have to look at the bigger picture. Yeah.
Thank you. And I'm glad you have taken us through that. Probably it can help people contextualize the circumstances within which they work. Because when you talk about other parties having their positions, what comes to mind are issues like when the biggest opposition, which was your party in the 9th Parliament, agreed not to send anyone to Yala, which happened even this time. And you have DP, UPC, they have their own agenda. So I think that can be a problem. But I think still ours is on expectations. You talked about the current Parliament being more collaborative with the executive than keeping it in check. So we expect that the opposition in Parliament tries to do the work that the rest of the members are not doing, which I want to ask Honourable Jonathan, being part of the opposition leadership in Parliament now. So there are issues I can single out some where Ugandans say, no, we feel let down by the opposition. One, there's an issue of ROCO, Now there's been an issue of the Computer Misuse Amendment Act. So even with the minority report on some of these issues, the voice is not heard. Just like Noop boycotted Yala elections, why haven't we seen something like that on some of these issues that Ugandans think are so important but are passing through? So using those two, can you tell us what is happening and why some of these issues you don't come out strongly as opposition in Parliament to oppose them?
Well, first of all, I'm very glad that Professor is here, and I think to lead the opposition in Parliament, while it is coveted, but I think it is the most difficult job for anyone to do. The parties that send us to Parliament, I come from UPC, they have their own arrangement. No two have their own arrangement. So in the House, you have members of Parliament who are opposition subscribing to the leadership of the opposition. And you have members of the Parliament who are opposition subscribing to the leadership of NI.
How does that work?
We have
Oh,
Yeah.
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 what I'm saying is we have members from our side who sit with us on the opposition side, but they pay allegiance to the NRA.
Like your party, or some members
We
of
have
your
some
party.
members from my party. I know members. There are some members from me. Some members. They are all in these parties. They are doing the same thing. So it makes it very difficult for you as the leader of the opposition to lead people who are sitting on your side, but in their mind, in their thinking, in their legislative agenda, they are with the opposite side. The examples you gave, I will come to it on Morocco. We had members who sit on our side, who signed the report supporting Morocco, and who debated in favor of
Oh,
they sit on the opposition side. If you look at the computer misuse bill that was brought to Parliament, we have members of the opposition who sit in the committee who had the opportunity within the committee to knock out some of
the minority report was signed by only one person.
Exactly.
Yeah, the one who authored it
Yes.
was the only
But
signature.
also we have members who signed the majority report, and there are members who tactfully avoided
To appear.
on either side, but you would easily read that if they So I think this parliament particularly met a tragedy when we went into the crisis in terms of when the late speaker died.
Mm-hmm.
It happened that when the late Jacob Oranya died, there was a big gap to fill in the house in terms of providing
Leadership.
that leadership in the house. Behind the scenes, I believe there was an attempt to have a middle ground so that the house is not put into crisis. Instead of going to the floor and then we embarrass ourselves, let's have a plenary negotiation. I believe that's where probably we got it wrong. The spirit must have been good, maybe, or people who had proposed that also knew very well that it would put the opposition in a very tight corner. Now, unfortunately, on our side, some members believed in that. I'm not against negotiations, I'm not against dialogue, but I think there must be a structured way of doing such things. So in the end, to make the house appear to be moving together because we're in a crisis, we have just lost one of us, we need to be seen to be in for this country, I think we took it too much. And in that process, we let our core responsibility of holding government accountable slip. We have done well. There are certain things that we have made statements, alternative statements, and the rest. But if you go further and ask what are the impacts, even a minority report, if you write a minority report and that report is not adopted, or specific issues that you have raised are not brought into the main bill, for example, if you are processing the bill, that minority does not make a lot of sense. If you make statements, prepare statements, and these statements are not impactful enough to change the course of a government policy,
Yeah.
if it is parish development model and government had proposed to do it ABCD and you are proposing XYZ, if they don't pick your X or Y or Z and build it in, I think it would be a failure.
But that is not up to you as the opposition, right? It's not up to you to decide whether they adopt it or not. You will have done your part, or is there more that you can do apart from just authoring a minority report, for example, to have it make any impact?
Yes, you can. And there are other incidences where I think the opposition have done something.
Mm.
How you bring up your minority report, what are the issues that you are speaking to? Because that's the house where people vote.
Mhm.
I want to pull from the last parliament before I come from this. You remember there was an amendment to the Parliamentary Elections Act, Presidential Elections Act, that came towards the end. The idea was that it should ban independence
Yeah.
from
Yes.
contesting.
Mhm.
The Committee of Parliament, Majority Committee, in fact, there was no minority, agreed with that position and it came to debate in the House. Some of us felt, though we were members of the party, we thought it was infringing on the constitution and we debated on the floor. We were persuaded at some point, we were called aside and said, you leave this, but we said, no, this is a matter that touches on the rights and touches on the constitution. In the end, our debate was able to influence. When it came to vote, the NRM voted with us, and most of them realized they were due. Now, the challenge maybe that comes with this house is that you don't have opportunity to put across your point. Hardly before
Mhm.
you even
Yeah,
make the preamble,
you are switched off.
you are switched off. And it doesn't matter whether you are an expert in a particular area, because that's how I think Parliament should actually, debate in Parliament should be guided. If we are talking about agriculture, most of us would look at professor,
Yeah.
would look at, there were a few other professors coming from that sector, you would give them time. And I think that leadership of Parliament ought to take that into consideration. You cannot say everyone can speak for 2 or 3 minutes.
Actually, if I can
Yes.
interject, there's a time when the only time I stood up to debate, and this is a former leader of opposition debating, and the 3 minutes I was switched off, and Speaker Kadaga wanted me to beg her to give me more time.
Also, the switching off is not a new thing of this parliament.
No, I just decided that is it. I will not debate again until I debated something on the bill on the loan requests for irrigation, and I didn't even debate. I told them, I know you will pass this, but you are not interested in the well-being of the country. If 300 million euro was put to start an agricultural bank, the impact on agriculture would be incredible. But this one, you are doing it, you will pass it, it will have no effect. So what Jonathan is saying, in America, if there's a serious debate, somebody would get up and say, I yield my time to Honourable Jonathan. And Jonathan will accumulate 2 hours.
Because you know that
Yes,
he
everybody
adds
will,
value.
yes.
Yeah.
And Jonathan will then get up and speak on a matter that is best placed
Yeah,
to
speak
speak.
about, yes.
Being elected to parliament doesn't make you competent. You're just lucky that you are in parliament. Even when you are an academician like me, you still have to read, you still have to adapt yourself to the practices of parliament.
But the problem with that, Professor, is that now we have people who are gauging the performance of MPs depending on how many times they have spoken on the floor.
Well,
so it makes it problematic for them to cede their time to more competent people.
The irony is that when serious matters, for example, bills, reports that are processed on bills that should be debated, they are given less time. I'm not saying other statements that come, for example, statements by ministers telling us when they are going to celebrate the World Malaria Day, which for me basically are information. Then you will see it's debated for 2 hours. For 2 hours. Just informing you will be in this district, this is the theme, these are ABCD of it. So I think some of the things we see happening in Parliament are deliberate, and I think that Ugandans are right to ask questions whether the opposition have done their part. Because the core mandate that we as the opposition should be doing is to hold government accountable. And if you see of the ones we have tried, for example, the committee of Kosase has tried to do something, you saw how it generated excitement. Because you are touching the real issues that we should do. But if you ask of the 4 committees, accountability committees that are in Parliament, the reports that they are supposed to process, how many? Most times I think we have reported either 1 or 2 of either 60 or 70 reports laid by the Auditor General. That is where I think Ugandans are right to question and say that the opposition in Parliament have not done enough. When it comes to critical matters, like that fraud on Rocco, where compromises were made and it went silent as if nothing happened, and nobody wants to talk about it. We have let it go, and that was a broad daylight fraud which was easy to see, and we have decided to keep quiet as members of the opposition. Why are we keeping quiet? Because the way Parliament is structured now is that service delivery by government, the executive, to our constituencies, to our area, is absent. So members of Parliament are the ones fundraising to construct the health center 3, maternity wards, dormitories, and whom do you invite to go and be your guest of honor who will give you a lot of money? Either the ministers, the executive, people who are on the other side, people who are going to give you more money. So how do you challenge them? How do you hold a minister or a ministry which is failing accountable, and the same minister has come to your constituency and your fundraising and given you 20 million shillings? So it is something that has taken away the strength of the opposition. It has negated it a lot. Then there are things that I believe during the time of Professor Latigo was not happening. I was told that before in that parliament, MPs were traveling to benchmark, but it was basically competent based. From the debates, they are technical people in the office of the clerk and the rest that will see you that you have debated the certain principle of human rights very well. There is an upcoming international conference on human rights, and they say, I think this is the right person to go there. They would then just call you without you lobbying. But what is happening now, members of parliament, the letters they write,
to ask to be
asking to
given
be
trips.
given money,
To
foreign
travel.
trips, the way members of parliament are kneeling around, the way members of parliament are, it's just absurd. You cannot imagine. So, and I can sympathize with the members of parliament of the ruling party, but not members of parliament from the opposition who are doing that. So how do you then hold government accountable if you are the one on their payroll? So when you hear rumors outside that members of the opposition are on government payroll, yes, some may be directly, but indirectly how? That's how members are compromised. Sometimes members are picked, and this is on record again, the speakers, both in the 10th Parliament, 9th Parliament, 10th and 11th, have written to government agencies saying, stop inviting my members without our knowledge, stop sponsoring them, because members are picked. A very sensitive matter, a bill is coming that touches on the lives of Ugandans. The very people who are proposing the bill picks you, and takes you out
On a trip.
and then tells you which clauses they want to remain and which ones should go. So,
They did that in this current parliament with ECOP. I think the retreat was in Munyonyo.
yes.
When they came back, I think the Minister of Energy gave them facilitation.
Yes.
And these were people who were accommodated there and stuff like that. So
I think that it is challenging times, and the opposition have generally, I think, let their guards down. Never mind that some leaders of the opposition, as I mentioned, of political parties, have their own arrangement.
yeah.
For example, now you know that in UPC, our leaders have made some verbal arrangements. They wanted to force it on us, on all members of parliament. Some of us said, no, we cannot. We know now DP has also come in. So while you are looking at the broader membership of the opposition, you should be able to look within and say, maybe not 100 and so are part of the scheme. Okay. Within the NUP itself, we have had members that from their voting, from their debating, some of them are just naive. I can say this. Some of them are purely naive. People are just excited. They're in parliament. They don't know how things are done. They are called to support certain positions. People are picking envelopes here and there. But in the end, that house is a house of record. And I always tell members of parliament, this is a house of record. You would think you are smart, you have moved through, but the record will be there. And when this computer...
The record is also being tampered with of late. So I have perused through some of the Hansard and they don't capture
Everything.
exactly what happened.
Oh, then that is very tragic.
I raised it one time.
So you know that
yes,
it is
I
happening.
am aware, because I will give an example. We had, as Parliament, the Committee on Education had processed the ministerial policy statements and the budget framework papers. They had some recommendations on how these enhancements of salaries for teachers should be done. It came to the House, it was passed. But what went to the executive was different.
From what was passed?
Yes, and it was changed from within the House. Honourable Mwanga Kivumbi has been following on the issue of the coffee deal. The recommendation that the House made was changed, something else was said. And it's a serious matter, it's actually a criminal matter. And I challenged the Speaker at that time, because I also have evidence that some bills in Parliament we process, they are changed, specific clauses are changed. So I one time asked the Speaker whether she actually certifies whatever
what
goes
is sent
under her home
to the
hand,
executive.
and she had promised that she would look into it. I also saw the Deputy Speaker promise to investigate Honourable Mwanga Kivumbi's claim. So I agree with you. Those are acts of criminality, and it shouldn't. The records must capture what transpires in Parliament as it is.
Thank you, Honourable. Professor, I am sure you are shocked at the revelations. Yes. But so among the things that Honourable Odur says, one of them, what he says about the debate on the independence in the 10th Parliament, specifically, caught my eye. It made me think the opposition, or even MPs, but specifically the opposition, will push something they are interested in and, and ignore some. So the reports, the alternative statements would be for sure just. Because like I'm telling you, we have in the first session where they had 21 alternative policy statements, about 14 minority reports, about 12 statements of the leader of opposition, that would really look to anyone as a really performing opposition. But beyond that, beyond those figures, what more can an opposition do in your experience to have impact and outcome or impact on the legislative processes?
You know, what Jonathan talked about, the Hansard is supposed to be a very faithful record of what every member said in the House. Even where there was applause, they would put in bracket applause. Now, if that is tampered with, The people who are doing that are not members of parliament. They are technical people. And all you need to do is go back and ask for audio recording, video recording of your contribution, and answered. If they don't tally, somebody must be fired. It is possible to trace that. And
What about the person who would have instructed that somebody to tamper with it?
No,
because I am very sure the technical people don't act on their own.
No, then it is up to you to save your skin by saying that I was instructed by so and so. But even then, if you are really somebody who worthy of an office, an instruction which is not right, you should
not follow it.
Yes.
It doesn't happen in this Uganda anymore.
Yeah, but that
people want to save their jobs.
Yeah, that the speaker and the other thing is that for example, the immediate independence parliament, government would read a budget and say we are going to build 22 hospitals, and the hospitals will be 22 in all the districts. So you don't need to go and talk to the Minister of Health
to have a hospital.
Yes. But in the situation now where things are happening, because a member is also looking at whether he delivers so that tomorrow he or she gets returned to the house. But in the process, you sell your soul. And once you are soulless, you are no different from a cow or a bird or a stone. And that is the tragedy of our country. The other element that is very important is that while the government side think that they're being successful, they're actually shooting themselves in the feet. It's like saying, this mirror shows how ugly I am, let me just cover it. In the end, you don't see yourself at all in the mirror.
But you remain ugly.
So it is important that you allow the opposition to see things from that perspective that you don't see. It helps you. I can tell you that for the State of Nation addresses that the president would have, and I would respond as leader of opposition. There was one incident, but there are many, where the president talked of how the tax revenue has gone up, and he cited certain figures. But even my secondary school mathematics would tell me that something is not right. So immediately I called the research department and I said, can I have the GDP figures for the last 10 years? And when they gave me, and I said, what about the tax figures they gave me? And when I did the calculation, for the value that the president was made to say in his statement, the economy, GDP should have grown in 2 occasions by more than 80%. And when I wrote my statement in reply, I did not, you don't rub it in when it is very obvious. I just made 2 indications. And I said, maybe I think the people in finance are misleading the president. Now that allows space for the president to appreciate you are a critic.
Yeah.
And I was told subsequently, if I was making my statement in his reply, he would actually
Listen.
watch it himself. Because I focused on, I would tear to pieces the claims that are in that thing. But I would then say, this could have been better if it was done this way. Bujagali and the first statements, Bujagali and the other dam. Where the first statement of the president, we will build 2 dams in 44 months. And I said, Mr. President, we have no capacity, even if the money was there. The train, even to just bring their own bars from the coast, is not there. So you rather focus on one, build capacity, and then we move on to the next one. Those dams got built, I don't know how many years after. Actually, Karuma hasn't even gotten finished. So it becomes a big challenge. I would encourage Jonathan and those who really want to be good legislators that read. I read like crazy. Not only in my field, in all kinds of fields. If you went to Pentagon Library, all these publications in Luganda, in Luo, in Runyankore, on the streets of Kampala, they're there. And they get people to interpret. Because you are only strong when you are informed. If you're not informed, you can be the tallest person in parliament. You're as useless as not being there at all. And that's the challenge that we see. And there's one other bit. You know, I never made any comment about the passing on of Speaker Olanya. Nobody had me. I never made any public comment.
Why?
Well, it's personal. I didn't. But I can give 2 examples when I was leader of opposition. I sat and I started seeing the patterns when an important issue would be brought on the floor and it is being debated. And you could see that the speaker would pick my most powerful debaters first. And then later, when the weaklings come, he would pick the most powerful debaters from the NRM side. And I did a record of 3 debates, and I went to the speaker. Speaker second, I said, Mr. Speaker, you know you are doing this. This is the pattern. You are not helping this parliament, and you are not helping your record in parliament. He was very embarrassed.
I thought you would be happy that he was picking your strongest.
No, because once you have exhausted your strong forces, you get wiped out.
There would be nothing for you, the leader of opposition, to say.
No, I could say something, but you're a commander. You are not a soldier. Your best soldiers have been.
The debate would have been skewed so much that they are not rescued.
So that was one, and then the other one is something that happened where a decision was made to appoint somebody in the judiciary, and I was very opposed. And I said that day, I said, Mr. Speaker, if you appoint somebody like this, and you were to appear before the person, how would you feel? You being a very senior lawyer. But something bothered me because that person had not put in the CV the age, claimed the qualification that I doubted, and also the law required that you must have legal practice for 10 years, and I knew that person was a company lawyer. That is not legal practice. So I went to the registry at break. I sent my guys. They got the company, the person claimed partnership. The name was not there. I sent an email to America. The qualification that person claimed was not there. And we came back. And I presented the thing. We reversed what we had passed. But we went for a jailers conference in Jinja, and I sat with the Chief Justice then, Chief Justice Udoki, Principal Judge, and we started discussing that person. And the Chief Justice said, the President has already written a letter sanctioning the appointment. I said, I'm not going to start a fight at an individual level. But consequences are reverberating in this country. Yeah.
On that note, let us take a short commercial break. When we return, we continue looking at these issues, the conflicts that are being talked about, debate in Parliament, and also switching off of microphones when the members are submitting. But we'll be right back with that and more.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
You're welcome from that short commercial break, and we're still discussing the role of and also the effectiveness of the opposition in Parliament, especially in the current Parliament. And I'm still with Professor Maurice Ogenga Latigo. He was correcting me that he wasn't the first opposition leader, but for us, life started in 86. Yes, yes. So he's the former opposition leader, currently a farmer and many other things, and also with Erute South MP Honourable Jonathan Odur, who also doubles as the Shadow Minister for Defence and Internal Affairs. I have another question, and I'll put it to you, Honourable Odur. In your legislative agenda for the second session, top on the list, the priorities were curbing corruption, media freedoms. I want to pick those that where actually you have done the opposite. When you talk about corruption, there have been so many allegations of corruption, and on the part of the opposition MPs, we can pick out Honourable Kagabo, who brought back 40 million allegedly given to him by the Speaker. And on that, the leader of opposition feigned ignorance and said, take it to whoever gave it to you. Yes. As though the leader of opposition had never heard that some people had received that money. The other allegations that we hear that we don't have proof for yet, the Rocco issue we are talking about, that some people are paid money to keep quiet, and there were people in the opposition. When you talk about media freedoms that you pledged to fight for, it brings us back to the Computer Misuse Amendment Act, where only one opposition member signed the minority report. One of the opposition members, the Kawempe MP Bashir, actually for him even signed, some tactfully just stay away, but this one signed the main report. what is the problem that you are talking of doing one thing, but then there's other things totally opposite going on?
Well, for me, I think you need to understand that Parliament, as we have it now, right from how the committees are constituted, is not like in the past. I understand before we joined, the members of Parliament themselves would express interest to join a particular committee where they think they are competent, and then they would then elect their own chairperson and vice, who will then be accountable to them. And now it is the opposite. The chairpersons are appointed on the basis of loyalty to their parties, not on the basis of competence. Some of them are actually competent. I can say that is accidental, but most of them, they take that loyalty. And the committee would give bills and references to the committee due diligence. They would process it. You see, the word in Parliament is process this bill. It is not just mere glossing over. The committees have the mandate to reject. After looking at it, if they think it infringes on the Constitution, the existing laws already provide for the same things, that the committee can actually come back and say it is not necessary to go further with this. And it has happened in the past with some bills. But what we are having, which is difficult for me to understand, it appears that we have compromises and personal interest. And legislation should never be made because someone is angry. Even if it's the president, that the president is annoyed that so and so has said this about him, and then now the president says you put this law, it should never be the basis of making a legislation. Unfortunately, that is where we have fallen short of. Now, coming to the question of how we should fight corruption, I am at a loss whether the leader of the opposition should actually be part of certain institutional arrangements. I'll give the example. When the decision was made from the last Parliament to bribe MPs, what we saw, the 29 million for the age limit, it was made in the Parliamentary Commission, where the leader of the opposition would sit and one other opposition member. And that's, in my understanding, legitimizes, because they are our representatives now there.
It means they were part of that decision.
I thought that the entire commission was to look at, welfare, yes, things to do with members of Parliament, recruitment, administration, and the rest. Certain things are, they are statutory in nature. For example, MPs must have offices, you have to rent for them, you have to facilitate them, put computers. Issues of vehicles, I agree with, although we had at some point thought we could have physical vehicles, but those are things that should facilitate some. But when it comes to other arrangements, you saw the 20 billion of COVID money that MPs were struggling to feed people in their constituency, so let's give them this money. Yes. So it becomes part of that. In this Parliament, the best we can do to fight corruption, first, as I mentioned, is that we have these reports already brought to us by the Auditor General. Very good work, pointing you to areas where you should actually focus on. When we pick one and process it over 2 or 3 years, I don't think we are doing ourselves any good. It might be catchy to pursue because there's a big fish involved or something, but what is the motivation of picking one and leaving others? I think that shows that we are not really committed to fighting corruption. Yes, to accountability. I think that is very disappointing. And I can tell you, the executive speaks that to our face. We have been told, we interact, we move together in buses, we move together. Some of them fail and they will ask us, but you people of opposition, you say you are very serious people. You have never processed this report. There was this issue, there is this one, there is that one, and you have not done something about it. So it speaks to our commitment to that legislative agenda. I know that most of the members who came on the side of the opposition are new, but that is not an excuse. By the time you decide to contest to be a member of parliament, you are competent enough to handle things that are coming. When you come to pieces of legislation that we are making, we know the numbers are not with us, but I think what the public wants to see is that we have actually debated and put forward alternatives. But when our members are part of it, when it comes to processing it, we are speaking in support of such a bill, and sometimes we conveniently probably absent ourselves not to be part of it so that it can pass, or at the critical moment, like it happened with Rocco. You look around and the members who are supposed to help, nobody was there. And you were here. I think that's where the question marks come. And I still go back and I say that as the opposition, if we think we are going to be deprived of certain services, if we speak against a certain position, that is the beginning of our weakness. I know the office, the entire opposition leadership, even shadow ministers, if you organize to go to the field, you still have to go and get clearance for you to get money to go and monitor. It's parliamentary work. So these are small things that I think have started playing very hard, weighing in the mind of members of the opposition. And the threat, the real threat that exists in that house. When allegations are raised, I think that as opposition, we need to dig deeper and understand where it's coming from. You gave examples of the Honourable MP. Well, he came back later and offered explanations. I hope they were right, the right thing. But I thought that on our side, we should have also picked it further.
But why wouldn't he offer explanations? If I come and accuse you, and you the one I'm accusing, send me to be investigated. Yeah, you are the accused. You are the one in charge of my investigation. How comfortable am I going to be in that sort? And your own leader is sort of abandoning you and saying, deal with it. You know, why would someone come with the explanations to let that go?
First of all, the allegation was widespread. I don't think it came only from multiple sources. I personally read, I think the Monitor covered it. Widely, the Monitor covered it and quoted a number
And
of...
the truth is that money changed hands.
Because
Yes.
the Honourable Kagabo came in later after Parliament had denied that money being there.
Yes. I think that...
But the story was there.
I think that the institution of Parliament probably was caught up in an embarrassing situation, because my experience in that Parliament is that the way money exchanges hands, it's so fast and it happens in a very ad hoc manner. When we challenged the 20 million that was given to MPs for COVID, there was a quick arrangement when the court made an order for that money to be refunded, to pay more double, which is 40 million. And at some point we were tipped where the money was being paid. And we rushed there with our camera crews and the TV, and we found members of Parliament of the 10th Parliament. They took off, literally running, and money was being in one of the restaurants around that time. So the way it happens, for me, I can never dismiss if an MP comes and say, yes, it happened. Although in law you speak with evidence, I can't get the evidence, I can never dismiss. I can also not say it happened or it did not happen. But deep inside, you would know that by the time an MP...
Most likely it happened.
By the time an MP makes such allegation, it means...
And came with his own money. Did he have 40 million to waste to bring, of his own money to bring unless...
There are two things about monies in Parliament. For example, the COVID money was part of a legislative process.
Yes.
And once it is an appropriation, I did not return that money. I refused, because to accept would be to undermine the authority of Parliament to appropriate.
You're telling
No,
the man
yeah,
who went to
yeah.
court
No,
challenged you guys.
because I was, even that court process was in my.
But in principle, did you agree with it that Ugandans should appropriate, that we should
No,
appropriate?
you see, my problem was that I was not there when
Yes,
when the process was
Yeah.
taking place. But once an appropriation was made, a supplementary, it is a legal outcome. And what I did personally was I added my
Some more.
25 million. I repaired about 150 boreholes in my constituency. I wrote a report, put all the receipts. I wrote to the speaker and I said, I did not return because this money was validly appropriated. And to return it would be to undermine. But
Yeah.
the problem that I have is when Parliamentary Commission makes decisions. I used to be in the Parliamentary Commission as leader of opposition, and many times the votes of Parliament would go before the Budget Committee to defend. You would have to justify why you are asking so much for Parliament before the Budget Committee. But the stories are here now. Oh, God help us.
And that brings me to the question I wanted to ask him, but you can.
Yes, no, the challenge I have with his position of saying once the budget goes through a legislative process, then maybe it is okay. You know, recently there have been allegations. Ministries and departments and agencies are now bringing budgets to Parliament, and it is said that parliamentarians are now appropriating the other side and then they would pick it back, including classified budget now, because the other processes has been tested in court and court has pronounced that if you budget and say an MP should get money to go and make roads or buy Porsche, that is an executive function. An MP should never, you are not an accounting officer, so money cannot be given to you to go and execute duties. That was the principle. The court used that because it wasn't an allowance, it wasn't maybe like a grant for cars and etc. Now, because that is on the record, now other innovative ways are now coming into play. That should we send this money now under the classified and then the money can come back? Would that be the right thing to do? Obviously, no.
Classified where?
Classified budgets are handled by either State House, Office of the President, the Ministry of Defense. Those are the only entities. So then what would become of...
Well, you see the thing that Ugandans fail to recognize, that nobody wins when we do the wrong thing. People will try to defend our country, and I would defend my country on facts. But the reality is that because we have done our politics the way we have done and where we have reached, without really thinking that when I'm long gone, what will history say? If you have that in mind, then what you do must be something like building a pyramid that will be there 1,000 years, 2,000 years after you have gone, and they'll say so and so did this. But if you have the illusion that it doesn't matter, you are burying yourself alive. And this is what is happening in our country now. Because all the resources that are being abused are resources that we would require to do the roads, to make schools work, to have strong laboratories. People are talking about quantum physics and synthetic biology, and you go to Makerere and you look at the labs, and you just shed tears. Now, we, unfortunately, are all victims. And therefore, in moments like this, we must talk to those who hold the power to manipulate.
Yeah.
That what you are doing is wrong. If you have a speaker who allows that to happen, that speaker is not worth the chair of speakership. And people must openly tell that person so. Because if you are part of the manipulation, then what is left? Absolutely none. And if you are a minister and you allow that to happen, somebody must talk to you on how you are failing this country by what you are doing. Unfortunately, like people have said, the voices that stand up and speak every day is dwindling. In the end, the roof will fall on all of us. Me, at least, I want the roof to fall on me when I have a record of having spoken. And I will not shy away. The parliament must have leadership that you can say, yes, this is a leader of parliament. I mean, I wrote about, for example, I was on television. You know, Zake emotion is moved to remove him because he's apparently at altercation with the speaker. And the same speaker presides over the process.
Same speaker sent him to be investigated also.
You can't do that. You would say, no, I have this problem, I cannot handle it. Deputy, you go and handle it.
Even if you actually tell the deputy to handle it your way, but at least
Yes.
be seen to be the one.
Yes. And I
You know what they say about justice? It must not only be done, but also be seen to be done.
For some of us who were in parliament and believe we operated when parliament had some semblance of being what it is supposed to be. Well, it is deeply painful. I mean, another time I was on the farm. You remember when Semuju, there were problems, and the deputy speaker, late Jacob, sent him out. And then when he came back, he wanted Semuju to apologize. I wrote an article immediately. And I said, the rules are very clear. Once you have sent him
already
out,
sanctioned him.
you cannot do that. And I called the deputy speaker and I said,
that is not right.
This is not right. And he came and apologized on behalf of the speaker. Or on behalf of Semuju. Another very interesting case, when we had this fighting in parliament, in the committee in our committee of rules, I am a member, and then they made reference to parliament. But one of my colleagues, who is now a minister of state, when we went for the sitting, he thought I would be defending the guys in opposition. It was about the pistol. Yes. But when I was in South Africa, I was told the speaker had actually ruled. She looked at the video and suspended.
The minister.
Yes. And so I came and I said, I'm not going to sit long. I've just returned from South Africa, but they were very edgy. Then I'd asked for the answer. And I said, this is a copy of the answer. The speaker already suspended this guy. So the committee has no business investigating him.
Yes.
They were so shocked that I was defending the minister. But that's how things should be.
Your opposition people didn't accuse you of being bought.
No, I have the advantage that they cannot point anything at me, and
But
so,
also you were using the very rules which
Yes.
was available.
Yeah.
Yes, in the rules.
and Parliament has clear rules, just like the judiciary. So when you see things happening
Mm-hmm.
in the house,
Yeah,
as if the rules are not there,
not there.
oh,
It's true. And that's where we ask where the opposition is when all that is happening. But Honourable Jonathan, you talked about accountability committees. In this same legislative agenda, the law talked about you in the opposition fighting wasteful expenditure through accountability committees and how reports will be churned out in 45 days. So this is 1.5 years of Parliament, and there are accountability committees that have not tabled any report in Parliament. I think the Government Assurances Committee, but also the Park local government, I think, did for the first time recently table a report. Park central government also very recently. I think, like you rightly said, the one accountability committee seemingly doing some work is Kosase. What are there measures that are being taken to rectify this? Because even the constitution gives 6 months
Yes.
for reporting back. So that means you guys are in breach of the constitution.
Yes.
The Auditor General is coming back with the new report very soon, because normally it comes around December. And when it comes, what will happen to this backlog that is being accrued?
Well, in the 10th Parliament, we were a bit lucky that one of the committees I was in local government was chaired by Honourable Regan Okumu. He had experience, and the committee managed to clear the entire backlog that was left by the 8th and even some 9th Parliament. Of course, some of them were inconsequential because it was beyond the 6 months. The problem that the opposition have to deal with to eliminate wasteful expenditure starts with you. Not every report that we process, we must go to the field. First of all, go to the field, because that is what has led to that backlog in Parliament. Committees don't have money, we cannot fuel the bus, we cannot do this. That has been happening. Some of the reports
Is it also a money-making venture that going to the field comes with allowances?
Yes, yes, going to the field has allowances attached, but I don't think that every report you must be fueling, going in a bus.
Actually,
to go and process. It is not.
And
some of the reports as well just
Don't-
needs you to pass it, to agree with it.
Yeah.
The Auditor General, by the way, does a very good report. You may only pick 1, 2, or 3 things to process. The rest you can look at it as a committee and say, we agree, we agree, we agree, and you pass it. So I have told colleagues in the past who sit on the opposition that to try to adopt that method. Look at the reports, categorize them. The ones that you can clear off, the ones that you can interact with.
Yeah.
Then there are these ones that you may need physical visits once in a while to be able to look at things.
and it must be justified
Exactly.
by saying by this element of the report.
Yes.
We have to go and see.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even maybe after inviting them, maybe they have not offered any satisfactory explanation, then say, we can take a look at this particular one. So if we want to eliminate wasteful expenditure, let's start with scrutinizing the budget properly. Because that's where if you tighten in that budget and you make sure you analyze and pick out areas where you see things are not serious, you have already done like 80% of the work. The 20 now will come. Now what happens is, and I have asked, that time the late Jacob Olanya was in the chair. I think I also did ask when Kadaga was there, how Parliament processes the budget. If it doesn't change, then these wasteful expenditures and it will continue. It is actually, what we pass actually may not even pass for a national budget. Members don't have chance to look at that budget. Things are done in piecemeal. Things are done very late. Sometimes the executives will not even provide some information until the budget is passed. They will refuse deliberately, and then the house will be put under pressure. You don't have to be responsible. Your salaries come from the same budget. So if it delays, don't blame us. You know, those petty reasoning. And members would succumb and say, our thing is also there, we pass it. So for me, the opposition have to be more critical in looking at the budget, eliminate the waste, and in the past we have identified some, but I think we have not been able to do it good enough. We can still do it better. So that the reports, which is now post-mortem, we can deal with it. And you know, the issue with the report is that after you have done your recommendation, you send it to the executive to take action. I don't know how many where the executive has taken action on. They will always come because they are the same group. But if you deny them money to waste, you have already done a good part of it. So I think that for those who are processing the reports on committees, let's eliminate creating a mountain out of things that are quite obvious and clear the report.
And by the way, the other thing which I know for a fact is that the Auditor General's reports are big documents. I don't know how many members of Parliament read
And internalize
those reports. Because if you were to do that, you definitely find, because the Auditor General will not list for you what you should do. They have their own format of reporting. To the extent that I remember one interesting occasion when Madam Jenny was Minister of State for Animal Resources. And I stood up, I'd read their ministerial policy statement. And I gave my contribution with a critique, and she interjected that I was being unfair. And I said, to let you know that I went through your report. This ministerial policy statement doesn't even have the word livestock in it. And it wasn't there. When I joined Parliament, I asked for, and we were in the Committee of Agriculture, I asked the previous 5 years ministerial policy statements. I read them. And I found it was cut and paste.
Yes. Changing the years only.
So one day we hit the ministry and they said, Parliament reads. I think they've gone back now to doing it because Parliament doesn't read. The opposition has a big obligation because you are not only forcing accountability, you're also trying to prove to the electorate that you can do it better, differently and better. And so you have a bigger responsibility. Every member in a committee should be tasked. If you cannot read the full report, assign sections of the report to individuals and say, at the next meeting, I want you to bring back what you found in that section. And then it becomes a document that is easy to share and discuss collectively. If we can do that, and it will be just like Trash resigning, and then this other guy will come back, and Labour will still be in opposition.
Well, it will be very unfortunate if the current opposition, which lays out very beautiful legislative agendas, becomes like in the last Parliament when Honourable Nandara moved a motion to leave the rest of the backlog, to clear that backlog. So now, if this backlog is also created, and you have a law who's saying we have to present our reports in 45 days, but probably is not following up to make sure that is done, and his members are not cooperative enough in that aspiration.
You see the risk, because these mandates emanate from the Constitution. If the Constitution says that you must process the report within 6 months,
6 months, yeah.
and you do not, and you process it after 2 years, those recommendations are
invalid. Yes.
Yeah.
they're invalid.
Yeah.
So what is very important is that, first of all, the Auditor General has made some recommendations. So if you want some action to be taken, you can actually pass those reports as they are. The moment Parliament says we have adopted, it will give you something. But where there are maybe serious wastages that need further interrogation, that's when you come in. So my point is, try to work within the 6 months, because that's the constitutional
The provision.
yes time frame. So you cannot sit and make your own. And I see, and I can tell you, some people who have messed up government funding are actually very happy, no matter the embarrassment they go through for a short while. They know nothing will happen because the law is with them. And we have had that where parliamentary reports are challenged in courts of law, and the courts do not have to look any further. They will just go to that provision and say this was supposed to happen within this period. It has happened now past that time frame.
But by the way, the sixth parliament censored a number of ministers. And the censorship arose from such reports. And if you get very clear reports.
Even the 11th parliament.
No.
Yeah. No, I mean the 9th. The 9th. Under Kasiano Wadri, I think their pack led to forced Kiduma Kubuya to resign. And
so once the report comes, which is very clear, and the minister doesn't take action, you can, and Parliament agrees with the report, they can move on the minister, so that it pays at a personal level.
I can also add something else. If you are carrying out investigations, I think it's important to avoid excitement and playing. If things are as clear, just put in your report. You don't need to overemphasize. If I've asked you, do you have this? Did you procure this train? And you say, I did not. I don't need to ask you further, which train were you? I just put in that report. Sometimes when you do that, and I think as opposition we need to learn. Professor gave that example where he pointed out the gaps in the president's speech. Sometimes when you go direct and say, this is what we found, it was not there, and you don't overhype it, it will find favor on the floor. It will not give them opportunity to counter-mobilize, because it will now be a political matter and they will politicize it. And they come and vote against your report, which report is very good.
We had a very strong example on Minister Kutesa. My people wrote the report, and I would insist on looking at the draft. And I said, actually, the current IGG, I said, you eliminate the politics. You are doing parliamentary work. You're not doing politics. They didn't. And when they went, these guys latched on the politics, and they left the report. And that was it. And I said, but I told you.
So I think as the opposition, there are times we have opportunity to play politics. You can separate. But when it comes to some of these reports, and if you want to really hold government accountable, there is a procedure and a process we should adopt. Be smart enough. Make sure that our output, anybody reading it, including the one who wants to defend, will say, but
there's no ground for. You just say that this is what was found, and that is it.
So I think we can do much better.
Okay, so Professor, I wanted to ask you something about the Parliamentary Commission, and the Honourable Jonathan talked about it, that for us we assume that you, the leader of opposition, and that other member in the opposition are bound by the decisions of the Parliamentary Commission. So, what role or at what point do you as a leader of opposition distance yourself from these positions? The reason I ask this is there are so many decisions that have been taken that are outright illegal and not really. So you look at, for example, the recruitment that is happening, the kind of the way in the manner in which it is happening. Recruitment is supposed to be by the Parliamentary Commission. I think by now they have recruited more than 200 people since this parliament began without any advert, any due process. And we have opposition people on that. You talk about something like the procurement issues. What role exactly do you play? You can talk about being overpowered, but what would you do?
In the Parliamentary Commission, the leader of opposition is a very, very senior person. And the leader of opposition cannot run away from a decision of a Parliamentary Commission. You can disagree and put your disagreement on record.
We have never seen any such thing.
If there's a pattern, then you can even threaten the Parliamentary Commission and says, what we are doing is not legal. I don't want to be part of it. And if this continues, I'm going to act. Our time we were lucky because the clerk to Parliament was Mr. Tandekwile. He was a polished civil servant, extremely competent. And those recruitments, behind the scene recruitment, could not happen. I can give you the example of a senior guy. Now he's a senior accountant. Very first class degree. But the speaker's head of civil service wanted somebody else. And they wanted to manipulate. But because the papers had to come before the Parliamentary Commission, I told them, I said, no, it is not going to happen. If you do this, I'm prepared to fund this guy to go to court, and I'll be a witness. And they backed off. Even that time, the budget, the vote of the deputy speaker and even of the leader of opposition were lumped under the vote of the speaker. Deputy Speaker Kadaga at one day literally cried because she could not travel. She had no money. But we did a simple thing. Instead of quarreling with the speaker, we just went Kunobwa and Tandekwile. We sat down, Kelo. We said, how do we solve this problem? We said, we are going to move in motion. I'm going to move in motion to split the votes. So that the deputy speaker has the office has its own vote, the leader of opposition has its own vote. And we didn't tell the speaker. And the things were circulated. Of course, he had no time to read it. And when that item came, we presented and passed. We split the votes, and it eased the tension between the speaker
and made life easy
and the deputy speaker. You know, so you have to be, as leader of opposition in that commission, you have to be open to what is going on and to be proactive. And it is important that nothing that you should do should suggest that you have been compromised. That means when others walk 2 steps, you walk 4.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the only way you can do it.
On the issue of debate, Honourable Jonathan, as we come to a close, you talked about how there's not enough time for debate. Of the bills, for example, we have all seen that all the laws that have been passed are passed in a matter of an hour or two. And when Honourable Semju one day got up and raised the issue of procedural matters or the haste manner in which they are passed, the speaker said it is okay, whoever wants to court can go to court. But we have not seen the opposition collectively question how these bills are passed. Previously, there would be a debate on a bill for 1 week.
Yeah.
What is the opposition? What is your position about that?
I am one person who has, on the record, questioned the suspension of certain procedures or processes to allow bills passed.
No.
For example, there is this new approach where the report from the committee comes and then they said, we don't need to debate the report now since we shall go to the committee stage. So everything we want to do, we'll do it there.
At what point do they say that? Before committee stage, when you are still in the committee?
At the second reading.
There must be a general report, debate of the report. Before,
now, before you go to the committee. At the committee, you now handle close by close.
Yes.
But what you miss from the general debate is that you miss opportunity to influence debate. And possibly even at that stage, the bill can be thrown out.
And to bring the perspective.
Exactly.
Yes.
So the general debate is very important. And the reason why I put that on record, and it's something I want to pursue further, when in future the law becomes problematic, you will understand. That is what the judiciary looks at, the judges. The judges will look at the debate and see what is it that the MPs were trying to address. What is it? What did they really want? So that they can now interpret that very specific section very well. If you miss that opportunity, I think, in my opinion, it is actually fatal. Such a bill should not stand on that ground alone. Whether it in the end, it should not stand. 2, if a report is being tabled,
because there's what they call bills second reading.
Yes.
Bills second reading is when the report is debated.
Exactly.
You cannot pass that stage and go to third reading. Yes.
And that is why you are saying in some instances they would even allow 2 weeks of debate the report so that you can gather as much views as possible from the members, but also to ensure, because you are making a law. It's not like these other statements we debate. You are making a law. And I am telling you on good record, some of the legislations we have passed, they are coming back for amendments because it has not met the scrutiny test that should. Certain things have passed when it shouldn't have passed. So I think as we come back as Parliament, and I've raised it with the Speaker, that stage must be very important. We should not get disillusioned by getting more numbers of bills passed. The quality also matters. It would be very impressive to do a number of bills. But if you pass some of them and they lie idle because it cannot be implemented, you have also not done any good job. Some of them are touching on very serious matters, some of new things. We have just had the human organ transplant thing. It's new. I thought we should have really given it more time. It's something I really wanted.
Passed in 1 hour.
Yes, I also knew. I'm one person who believes it is a very important and crucial bill that we needed, but I thought that probably we should have gone a bit slower.
Being also a technical thing.
It's technical, but it's also something
You see, if you take an important bill and you debate and say we will continue the debate tomorrow, you give the media time to discuss how it was debated.
Yes.
You'll get some people who actually are experts in an area who will offer themselves and come and say, look, the way this is being taken in that direction.
You allow consultations, reflections.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to show you that perhaps in some of those bills, there may be one or two gaps. You can see the amount of time the president takes.
To assent.
He has brought back a couple of them.
And exactly. After taking
Not
all
a
that
couple,
long,
about 5 so
most
far.
of them come back, and the issues that he's raising, some of them, of course, are just
His interests, but
interest.
others
But you can see that he can also touch on some of the issues that we had glossed over.
yeah.
So I think that it is something that as opposition we should pay much attention to.
It is as if now it's the
I
president.
am going back to that kind of understanding that wants to come in the House. I am told that it happened in the past with the previous parliament, that people would caucus in corridors and the rest. But that caucus must be on something that is good, entirely good. It must not be about compromising your position. You drop your minority, don't do this, don't do this. That's the problem I have.
That's what I had.
think
the bill's second reading, in my time that I was in Parliament, it was never curtailed.
yes,
And it is a solid requirement of the legislation process. And by the way, that is the cardinal role of Parliament, to legislate and the oversight which the opposition largely have. But it is the entire Parliament, because that mandate is not given vested in the opposition only. It is vested in the entire
In
Parliament.
the 9th Parliament that I covered, which is when they debated the oil bills, there would be such a debate on even something as small as a word, may and shall, and there would be a back and forth. When they debated the Registration of Persons Act, it was the same thing. So you'll have 2 weeks, people are coming back, there's a caucus, there's what. But now, I am told the Speaker tells people in the committee, harmonize your views. I don't want a lot of time wasting when it comes to the House. But what happens to the MPs that are not part of the committee, but are in the House and want to debate the bill? Should we now be saying that all the 529 members should be going to the committee that is discussing a bill for their views to be heard there?
No, it would defeat the particular procedures that are put in our rules of procedure processing a bill. I believe there was good reason for the bill to come and be read for the first time and referred to a committee of only 30 people.
Yeah.
And that committee should come back with a report, which report should be
Debated.
given.
Basis.
Yes.
Yes.
Even before debating the report, members should be given adequate notice that the report is ready and the report is here.
And they should go through it, scrutinize, so
Exactly.
that when they
So these days it's tabled and the bill is passed.
Well, some reports have come at very short notice and it's debated and the bill is passed. Some for some good other reasons, I think personal interest and etc. maybe by the state, have taken time. Said first put it on hold. We have had some reports that are ready and should have been processed, but they have been put on hold. But I think that our rules have catered for that. Only if Parliament and the leadership sticks to those rules. Because it foresees those situations. If we stick to those rules and say that the report must be tabled, and tabling means this,
Yes.
and it must be 3 days prior to the debate, 3 days is adequate enough for a member of Parliament to process. Then when it comes to debate, I think as a presiding officer, if you have 529 members, assuming all of them are around, I wouldn't allow, if I was sitting there, until probably half at least half have commented on a legislation. Other things you can get only 10 members and the rest.
Yeah.
But when it comes to making a law, I think if it were possible, all members should have spoken on it. But you must get some good numbers to speak on it, because from that debate, it is when you'll actually know whether particular clauses would stand the test.
And I would still urge that you try and push for yielding time to colleagues,
Yes.
so that somebody who is very competent leads Parliament on matters that they are best placed to lead the House. The 3 minutes is a very arbitrary thing. I mean, it is based on what research?
Actually, we now do 1 and 2. 3 minutes are very rare for us.
It is based on what?
Gentlemen, I am afraid we have to stop here, but I will give each of you a chance to give your closing remarks, starting with you, Professor.
Well, I would thank the leader of opposition and the opposition and Parliament for struggling to do what they must do in the face of very challenging times in Uganda.
Yeah.
And my appeal to all of them is that the responsibilities that they have as members of Parliament is a responsibility that they exercise on behalf of the whole country. When they don't do it right, the country suffers and we are all victims. So they should do their best. And Parliament should be Parliament, independent and arm of the state. If the government wants to bring in legislation, you scrutinize it at its merit and you pass it or reject it depending on fair consideration. And lastly, I would suggest that for Parliament to function well, adequate information will be required. And Parliament should consider the possibility of members yielding their time to individuals who can then competently lead the House on such matters. It happens even in America, where they have very competent technical staff. And they still yield their times and let somebody who has picked a niche to do the best in that circumstance. But otherwise, we pray for you and we wish you well.
Thank you, Honourable. Yeah, Honourable Jonathan.
For me, I think the most important point is for us as leaders, especially in the opposition, to take positive criticism coming from the public, their demands, their expectations, to be receptive. I don't like when we become dismissive, when we become defensive. Amidst the challenging environment, political environment we are working in, I think it's our duty to explain to the public to understand. It is not easy to deal with the kind of environment we are dealing with, where Parliament itself is being hijacked. The core mandate that we should be doing, somebody is not happy that we are doing that and will always try to interfere with us. Secondly, I like it when senior citizens who have been before us share with us. And I would encourage Professor Latigo to reach out once in a while if you find people who are receptive. I have one elder from Lango, the former deputy IGP, Julius Odur. Amongst others, every time something comes up, he would pick a phone or write an email to us. And as a leader, the moment I read that opinion, it makes me reflect that there are people who are watching me and what I am doing. And these are very eminent persons. I think if we embrace that culture, that should also go out to leaders at Parliament, to the executive, even to the judiciary. Sometimes the things we see, some of us may be too young to pick a call and call them. But I think senior leaders who have been there, these are your contemporaries, your age mates, you must call them to order. Because some of the things that I see happening, I would, if I'm at that level, I don't think I would do it. They also need to be called to order. So would like to appreciate the input by the leaders who have been there before. Some of their experiences are very valuable. And I think as leaders of today, we must build on that to take forward this country.
Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for coming, Professor. We are glad we finally got a hold of you. Thank you, Honourable Jonathan, for being part of the show. I found this debate, for me, very, very revealing. I hope the viewers also enjoyed. Thank you to the viewers for watching Civic Space TV. And thank you to the camera crew for the good job you do here. From us here, it is a good weekend. We'll be back next weekend with Focus on Parliament.